And this is just not bringing them home from the wars. We bring them home from the leftovers from the old wars. Why are we in Japan? Come home from Japan, come home from Korea, come home from Germany. There's no reason for us to be subsidizing them. Now, as a constitutional president, I would be very cautious to be looking toward the proper procedure and working with the Congress. But in the area of foreign policy and the movement of military troops, the president does have this authority. I don't even have to ask permission to move the troops around. There are no declared wars. So if we are able to achieve this victory, we can immediately bring the troops home. Instead of building more and more bases overseas like we're doing now, we have 900 bases. We're building more of these drone bases, just aggravating the people of the world. I would say bring the troops home, open up some of those bases that they closed in the 1990s. They closed bases in the 1990s. At the same time, they were building bases in Saudi Arabia, causing more trouble. So it's really time at least to get those troops home immediately. Let them spend the money here at home for a while. That would give us a bit of a boost. One of the reasons I went into medicine, because I do remember World War II and Korea, and I hadn't decided what profession to go into. And one of the things that motivated me to go into medicine was the fact that I never wanted to carry a gun. I never wanted to shoot anybody. And I thought, well, I'll probably be drafted someday, and I'm certainly not going to play that game in war. And lo and behold, you know, I was drafted in 1962, ended up being in the service for about 5 years. But the military draft, if you think of it, it's still on the books. You still have to register. It's always the assumption there, that position taken to make sure that the government knows that they own you and they'll take you and put you in the military when they want to. So in a free society, you not only don't have registration, but you never have a military draft either. We should be willing to defend our country, and it should be, you know, across the spectrum. Age shouldn't matter, sex shouldn't matter, if we're under attack. But this idea that we go and look for wars to fight because we're spreading our exceptionalism. You know, America had been an exceptional country, but this whole idea that we're so exceptional now that we're going to force it down the throats of everybody, and if they don't accept us, we're going to bomb them to oblivion, and we call that American exceptionalism. I would say that if we want to spread our goodness and our good values, is become good and become valuable, protect. Before we preach to others and enforce laws or try to enforce laws in another country about practicing civil liberties, make sure everybody in this country is protected from our government's interfering with our civil liberties. That's what we need to protect. Set a good example. You know, they claim that we're in a war against terrorism, and they use that term rather loosely, because terrorism, of course, isn't a country. How can you declare war against terrorism? Terrorism is a tactic. It's a wicked, mean tactic. Timothy McVeigh was a terrorist in that sense, but because he was an American, nobody decided, well, we have to attack America because Timothy McVeigh was an American. So this whole idea that we have to have a perpetual war going on is only there to make sure that we are intimidated, and that if you don't obey exactly what they want, that you're unpatriotic, just like what happened in World War II. And the bigger the wars, the more likely they are to undermine our personal liberties. And just look at during World War II, how we had concentration camps for the Japanese Americans. And once again, it was a violation of the principle, who owns that life? I mean, the people who were incarcerated didn't commit a crime, and yet it was assumed that the government owns that life and they can do what they want. The tax code is built on this assumption that the government owns your your life, because they say that if your tax rate is 40% and I offer to lower it to 30%, the people who believe in big government, they'll come back and say, you can't do that. That'll cost the government too much money. Now think about that. How's it going to cost the government money if I'm just giving your own money back or not taking as much from you? But it is based on the assumption that they own all your income and you'll get to keep a certain percentage under their conditions. So thinking about this as self-ownership of your life in economic terms or in personal liberties or the draft, very, very important. But we have drifted a long way from that, and we have been too casual about it. It is easy to blame a lot of different sources and a lot of different people for this. We certainly can blame our government because they've been negligent, whether it's the executive branch, the judicial branch, or the legislative branch. But in reality, government reflects what the people have allowed to happen. So it's a responsibility of the people as well. And this is why we need to get a whole generation, plus many more, energized and an understanding of what true liberty is, that we were on the right track. The Constitution gave us a pretty good start, and yet we have drifted so far. Now we have a foreign policy. We don't even consult with the Congress anymore. We don't get a declaration of war. It's just so vague. And now, not only do we not we don't have a president that even consults with the Congress. Just think of Libya. Oh yeah, it's a great victory yesterday, and the president's bragging about it. You know, I got another one. You know. But how can we be proud of that? I mean, no matter how bad a guy was, whose responsibility? It's the responsibility of people of Libya to make their self-determination and deal with that. But no, we've ended up paying for this. It was our bombs and our weapons that do this, and believe me, it will be our burden. It's not going to go away. I mean, just think of all the billions of dollars that we gave to Egypt to prop up and pretend that we had peace in the region. Then finally our pet dictator gets overthrown, and now it's more dangerous there than ever. And this is what we did with Saddam Hussein. He was our close ally and gave him support. And then finally, you know, we decided we had to change that. And we did it with Noriega. We did it with, you know, we were involved in Iran. They were on their way to developing a pretty democratic system. So in 1953, we said, no, we want you to have democracy. You might keep all your oil. So we wanted to have our dictator in, so we installed the Shah. And he was brutal. And then after, what, from 53 up to 79, what did it do? It stirred up hatred, antagonism, not only against the Shah, but against us. And just look at the problems. There's a long time ramification, the unintended consequences, the blowback from it. What about when we were in Afghanistan, actually attempting to be on the right side of the issue when the Soviets were in there? We were actually on the same side as bin Laden, saying, look, they've invaded this country and we're going to help you throw them out. The whole problem is, after the Soviets got thrown out, we decided it was our country and we were going to stay. It makes no sense whatsoever. It's a schizophrenic foreign policy. You know, I've always said that we have only two options. One, that we tell the dictator what to do, and if he does it, we give him a lot of money. If he doesn't do it, we kill him. And, you know, I thought those were the only two options. But if you look at Pakistan, they've actually come up with a third option. And the third option is, we'll do both. We'll keep bombing you and undermining, killing the people, making them mad at their own government because their own government supports us, and we give the government money. And then we wonder why there's chaos in that country. But I'll tell you what, there is another option of all those three. And that is the one that the founders advised, that George Washington advised very strongly in his farewell address. And that is making friends with as many people who wants to be friends and trade with as many people who want to trade. Not to try to get involved in internal affairs, not to get involved in entangling alliances. I can't think of anything more entangling than getting involved in the IMF and the World Bank and the United Nations and going to war over these institutions. So as bad as it has been over these many decades of us slipping into undeclared war, it's actually getting worse, because we went into Libya and now in Uganda with no consultation with the Congress and saying, you know, this is the problem we have, and try to make the argument it was for national security reasons. None of that. It's just totally ignoring the people and the Congress and going and getting the permission from the United Nations and the troops going in and the money going in under NATO. This is a major step toward world government. And also, many that like world government are very much aware of the same thing that many of us are aware of, that our financial system is very, very shaky, and there will have to be a new monetary system, because fiat money printed out of thin air, eventually self-destructs, and we're in the middle of seeing this self-destruction. So most people realize that there will have to be a new currency. I know a good way to get started on that. Why don't we look and find out what the Constitution says? It says that only gold and silver can be legal tender. That would be a good start in the right direction. But there are many planning that the reforms will come. There'll be a new currency. It'll be a paper money loosely tied to gold, but it will be run by the United Nations. This is when we'll have to make a major decision on whether we think we should maintain our national sovereignty. You know, I think the states should run most of the government. The government was never meant to be large in Washington. But over the decades, we have allowed so much of the government to go to Washington, and now it's shifting even into international government. But once again, we have to decide where our rights come, where our national sovereignty come, where our personal liberties come from, and decide what we want from our federal government. The founders, literally, the colonists asked the question, what should the role of government be? And they didn't like the role of the king. I'll tell you what, from my estimation and by others, the role of the king was rather minor to what the king in Washington is doing to us today.